A typhoid fever is an illness caused by an infection with a specific bacteria called Salmonella typhi. The infection spreads through a contaminated food and water or through close contact with someone who is infected. Symptoms usually include high fever, headaches, abdominal pain, and either constipation or diarrhea. Typhoid fever is highly contagious and, if not treated, could be fatal. Well, to unpack this further, we have a health practitioner, Dr. Marlon McKay, joining us in studio. Dr. Marlon, thank you so much for joining us. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, thanks very much.
Now, there's been a bit of a scare that there might be a typhoid outbreak in South Africa. Have we had cases of typhoid before in the country?
Yes, we had actually a few cases last year. In fact, one patient died. And there's obviously a scare now in Zimbabwe. And over the festive season, of course, many South Africans or Zimbabweans go home. And with many of them returning to South Africa at the beginning of this year, there's always the fear that some of them may be infected with typhoid and then arriving in South Africa. And so many of our health facilities have been placed on high alert in order to raise awareness about it and how to detect it early so that it can be treated. It doesn't have to be fatal, you know, although in 5% of untreated cases there can be death. But antibiotics are easily available, so it can be treated quite quickly, and patients can be cured from it on the condition that it is detected early enough.
Well, what are the symptoms of somebody who has been infected with typhoid? Perhaps if they know, they can rush the doctor quickly enough to get tested and know on time.
Yeah, so it's usually in the background where they've come from an area where there has been an outbreak of typhoid. Right. So its travel history is always very important. And then development of fever. And the fever is very high, and the fever doesn't tend to abate. In other words, it tends to stay quite high, some 39 into the low 40s even. Abdominal pain with cramps, and as you mentioned before, sometimes even with diarrhea, constipation, sometimes even bleeding. There may be headache, and chills is very, very common, and sometimes even a red rash that can appear on the tummy area. I think it's very important. One of the other illnesses that can present quite similar to that, which is much more common, is malaria. So if you do have patients who tend to have some of those symptoms in the context of a travel history, they need to get to a health facility immediately, mention to the doctor, listen, I have traveled recently, I may have been exposed to either malaria or typhoid, and the relevant blood test and stool culture can be sent off, and the diagnosis can be made timeously.
And so how is a typhoid transferred or transmitted from one person to another?
Yeah, so interesting, animals are not involved, it's human contact, and we talk about the fecal-oral route. So the germ, the bacteria is found in the stool. So the moment the stool becomes contaminated, can contaminate water, it can even contaminate food. And so with patients who have come into contact with someone who is a carrier or is infected with typhoid, it's very important to wash hands. Hand hygiene is probably the most critical. Adequate preparation of food is the most critical. And the drinking water and avoiding water that could be contaminated is very important.
And can you just take us through the treatment of typhoid for someone who's detected it early, has been diagnosed? What is the treatment process and how long does it go for?
Okay, so the treatment process would be a course of antibiotics. And the antibiotics are freely and readily available, and patients respond well. It can be given either intravenously or orally. And it's also very important that the patients are well hydrated. So we usually have to put them onto a drip with rehydration solution in order to prevent dehydration and kidney ailments related to that. So the treatment is the easy part. It's just getting the patient to a hospital, diagnosis made, and then put onto the appropriate antibiotics.
And is there a sort of a vaccine for typhoid? I'm aware that people that travel get yellow fever cards, for yellow fever. Is there like a typhoid vaccine available?
There is a typhoid vaccine that is available. There's one for children and one for those over the age of 5. But one has to bear in mind that the vaccine is not 100% effective. It's only about 70% effective, so adequate precautions still have to be made. So don't rely just on a vaccine for 100% protection against typhoid.
And if you're on the vaccine, how long does it last for? Because I'm aware that the yellow fever one is valid for about 10 years, so
yes.
How often do you have to go in?
So the vaccine, usually you just need a once-off vaccine. You don't generally need a booster or revaccination. Yeah. So it can last for a significant amount of time.
All right. Now, you mentioned something about people coming in from having traveled outside the country and coming in. Are there any sort of screenings going on at the different ports of entry to help and detect typhoid?
No. So from a medical point of view, it's not practical to do that. The main focus is if anyone does get sick. The incubation period, very interesting, is about 5 to 21 days, which means from the time that you've been exposed to typhoid and transmitted, there may be a period of up to 3 weeks in which you will exhibit no symptoms. So those just returning may still be fine. But once you get sick, which will probably be toward the end of January only, that's the time to bear in mind that you have traveled, have been exposed, and unexplained fever, headaches, chills, abdominal pain, change in your bowel habit, constipation or diarrhea, get to a medical facility. So it's not practical and cost effective to screen people even before they get ill.
Well then, Doctor, let's talk about precautions, or what tips can you give to our viewers to prevent themselves from getting typhoid?
Number one, meticulous hand hygiene. Wash your hands thoroughly after you've used the bathroom, before preparation of food. Preferably drink bottled water and avoid drinking water, especially if the water comes from a poor source and you're not too sure of it. With meat, make sure, and cooked food, make sure that you eat it piping hot, for instance. Fruit and veg, make sure that you can peel it yourself. Peeled vegetables or peeled fruit is probably safer than just fruit that you take off. Okay, so washing of food, adequate preparation of food, meticulous hand hygiene, and eating food that has been cooked thoroughly and is piping hot at the time of eating.
And also peeling it yourself, you've mentioned.
Peeling it yourself. You must prepare your food yourself. Don't trust anybody, and avoid eating food from someone who could be ill with typhoid.
Now, with the hand washing specifically, how does a person wash their hands effectively? If you could just show us the gestures, because oftentimes a person just rubs their hands together and thinks that their hands are clean.
I just come from, we traveled by road, and it's amazing using the bathrooms how few people wash their hands and how many people do it incorrectly. So the length, duration is quite important. You need to sing happy birthday through. So if you sing to yourself, happy birthday to me, happy birthday, that's the duration of time that one needs to. And then there are at least between 6 and 8 steps, which means under running water, put the soap in your hand, you can rub it like that. You need to rub your thumbs like that, rub your thumbs in between the fingers like that, in between, like this, and like that, all right? Singing through, rinsing it off, and then preferably using a paper towel. It's most hygienic. Drying your hands thoroughly. If you walk out of the bathroom and there's still moisture on your hands, you have not washed your hands adequately and thoroughly enough.